welcome to the Chainlink User Roundtable. My name is Andy Boyan from Chainlink Labs. Title of this User Roundtable is The Gaming Metaverse. We're joined by a number of interesting panelists. When I invited them here, none of them asked me, like, why are you doing a panel? They all just joined in very willingly and happily, and I appreciate it very much. But the reason I wanted to do this panel is because I'm fascinated by this topic, this area, and I thought this would be a great, fun topic, and I really wanted to dig in. And so who better than to bring in people building different versions of the metaverse in our ecosystem, all Chainlink users as well. So we are super happy to host this from Chainlink Labs. We're going to get started here in just a sec. We've got Diego from OVR, Robert from ChainGuardians, and Irvin from OpenDive. Awesome to have you guys here. Thank you so much for joining me. But let us start right away. The context of this, we've had a few months now, quite a few months now, to process the Facebook Meta announcement, the rebranding from Facebook to Meta, really launching this idea of the metaverse into the public consciousness. Many of you, all of you, are building metaverse at that time. Like, it had to have been a shock, a surprise, a little bit of excitement, a little bit of fear. But then the broader world started to grapple with this whole concept of the metaverse. So to start, how do you think now, given a couple of months in, how do you think the public understanding of the metaverse has changed? Where do you think we are? And in doing so, tell us a little bit about what you're building. Diego, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks. So, of course, I mean, the Meta announcement was, a great push, I think, for everybody that is working on the metaverse. And because basically before, when I was talking about what I was doing, people really scratched their heads. And now they say, oh, yes, you're doing that metaverse things. Yes, I heard about that. Or Zuckerberg is doing it also. So, I mean, in terms of awareness, this was really great. Of course, we are not really on the same path of Zuckerberg. We're building something totally different. But also, I see that in the general consciousness, even if, I mean, Zuckerberg maybe start the ball rolling, open metaverses are something that are actually grasping attention also of brands, and many big companies are looking into that. So, I mean, in our case, what we are building is different, both because, I mean, it's decentralized, but also because what actually Meta from Facebook is doing is trying to create a virtual world. So that is the classical, actually, metaverse representation. I mean, the one for Snow Crash. So also the fact that 4 years ago they bought Oculus for a gazillion dollars. I mean, this idea didn't really came out of the blue. It was something that they were building. So in our case, we are not focused on VR metaverse, but on an augmented reality metaverse, and also the means that we use to actually experience this metaverse is not really the headsets that are super cool, but basically very few people have those. Our technology basically is scaled to run on mobile phones, so that we have the broader public possible. So right now is mobile phones, because this is the best way to experience augmented reality, and in a close future, probably 1 year or less, with smart glasses, as soon as there is a device that actually is affordable enough to be widespread. And yeah, I mean, it's anyway, it's all good. It's all good.
I love the diversity of different metaverse type experiences here. Augmented reality, a really fascinating snapshot. Let's pull in a little bit more. Irvin, maybe you've got a little bit more of a virtual world that you guys are building, or you can talk about that a little as well. How has the reception been since the Facebook announcement as people come to understand what you're building?
Yeah, in particular, I think we're not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it. I think, you know, efforts from big corporations really lead to the bastardization of technologies and a lot of these concepts, right? And the gentrification of the technology itself. Because even after the Facebook quote unquote metaverse launch, what do we see? Now everything's a quote unquote metaverse. You know, a simple P2P game is a metaverse. You know, a 2D scroller is a metaverse. It's a mixture between, you know, seeing the bastardization of the quote unquote concept and the gentrification of the tech. And so also, I think we're not a fan of it because it was particularly focused on virtual reality and distracts from the broader concept of the quote unquote metaverse, right? Which encompasses various areas of research like identity, virtual economies, and a plethora of research in socioeconomic questions, right? What happens when you're interacting in the virtual world? What happens when you cross over different virtual worlds and so on? And even as, you know, we consider, you know, like, for example, in the context of the metaverse, like personally here at OpenDive, we consider the metaverse as actually leading to a bridge between the virtual and the physical, and what we call the cyber physical, right? And so there's not an emphasis on that. And so I think it's a good opportunity really for the retail to kind of get a gist of it, but it distracts from the broader concepts. And lastly, I'll make the note that it's actually also personally, our concern with the efforts from Facebook, because in reality, not what you see is actually big corporations or businesses trying to approach the metaverse in their own terms, right? Because when we talk about in Web3 about the metaverse, we talk about things being interoperable, right? We talk about optionality, inclusiveness, but the quote unquote business-driven metaverse is closed, right? I've been on a few different Twitter spaces where people are saying, hold on a second, this whole notion of interoperability between, having different worlds, virtual worlds, and characters and assets traveling across, it wouldn't work, because essentially we're going to damage these quote unquote companies or businesses building these, gaming products. And, the question is that in reality, that's not our problems as users, right? As users, our problem is not, it doesn't have to do with like the business or the company not building good experiences that kind of keep the users engaged, right? And stuff like that. But, it's very interesting, I think, to see that Facebook kind of brought this to the retail perspective, but there are questions like, imagine like a vampire attack on a metaverse world. Things like that are very interesting to explore.
It's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is, or in other conversations I've heard, is the Web2 model doesn't always necessarily fit in a lot of these decentralized systems. Like there's give and take that is going to happen, that's already happening, and we're now exploring what does that look like. Is it player-owned assets? Is it user-owned assets? And are they transferring between an OpenDive and a Facebook Meta? Whatever that happens to be. Very open questions and very interesting in terms of Web2 models as well. Robert, from ChainGuardians, what is your perspective on this? Has it eased your conversations with people about what you're building? And talk a little bit about what ChainGuardians is building in terms of Metaverse.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some really awesome kind of talk points from Diego and Irvin there, and I'll probably piggyback off some of the things that they've said, because I think that they've both hit a lot of really important factors. I completely agree with Irvin in the sense that I'm not a huge fan. In fact, to say I'm not a huge fan is pretty much an understatement. That Meta, I'd even dislike calling the company that name, if I'm completely honest, because I almost feel like, how can one just basically say, well, now ChainGuardians, we're going to call ourselves Concept. I kind of struggle with that, because the word in itself, I'm not quite sure how one can kind of like, ascertain ownership of that or the rights to that or whatever. But that, I'm not here to kind of talk about that in too much detail, but safe to say I'm not a huge fan of that. For many of the same reasons that Irvin has kind of alluded to, is that essentially Facebook are looking to, I would say, monopolize. They are looking to essentially turn what is a concept and in many cases an ideology in terms of what level you're discussing or talking about the metaverse within, and turn it into a proprietary platform where essentially they have full control over that world. Now, that to me is a virtual world, a proprietary virtual world. That to me is not a metaverse. I think that we need to be really careful in defining those terms. For me, a proprietary virtual world shouldn't be confused with what the metaverse is. And then again, I think it's important when we're talking about it to the public, is that we're not talking about like, or we're defining what we mean when we talk about the metaverse as the kind of the first step, because on a product level, on an ideological level, the metaverse is this kind of concept, which is what Irvin was alluding to before, where anybody's tacking on the term metaverse now, and everything all of a sudden the product is a metaverse. But that what they're talking about here is the ideology, right? They're talking about this space or the evolution of the internet, where one can be represented as a digital self across these entirety of kind of interconnected experiences, but they're actually referring to their products as a metaverse, and that's not always distinctly true. The definitive characteristics of what is to define a metaverse are, where there is a digital representation of self, which is typically reflected in like an avatar. Other kind of features of a metaverse will include things like, for example, interoperability, the ability to kind of experience multiple different layers of content experience across like synonymous or cross-platform, if you like. So an open world, an open environment, for me, is what constitutes what a metaverse is when I talk about it on a product layer. And that's kind of like how I'd enter into this. And I think in terms of ChainGuardians and where we come in it from, I guess we've just unveiled Cryptoverse, which is, you know, a 3D virtual world. I would argue that is a product which is a metaverse because of the characteristics that define it. You know, however, you know, in terms of the actual RPG and the other products within the ChainGuardians ecosystem, they are not a metaverse. And I try to be very clear when you see, you know, NFT games or anything else that pop up saying we are a metaverse product or project. I think that that's almost diluting, and I think even Irvin used the word bastardizing, you know, the use of the term there. So yeah. Anyway, that's where I'd start with my point.
Yeah, I think I just want to add two points, because I always get this notion that people think the metaverse is something relatively new, and everyone attributes the metaverse to, you know, Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, right? But you know, the whole concept of the metaverse has its forebearers, right? Even as early as in 1800s, you know, I remember in 1932, the term virtual reality first appeared. You know, like in 1945, there's this thing called the Memex, which essentially allows you to kind of, it was like imagining how a primitive computer device would work like. And so the concept has been there for quite a while, right? It's nothing relatively new to, you know, Snow Crash. Snow Crash kind of quoted this term, and there were even previous kind of like books. So when you look at actually the novel called, I think it was True Names, right? That's like a forebearer by the author William Gibson. And so the concepts of text have been there, you know, thoughts have been laid out, and now we're kind of at a tipping point where we kind of have to kind of put these pieces together and make it happen. The second point that I wanted to make really quick is that, and I think, you know, like as we all know, there's always like, you know, trends in technology. And so like my perspective on here is actually the same trend that we saw early on in 2015 to 2017 with the whole notion of distributed ledger technology. I don't know if you guys realize, I mean, I was there in the trenches. I was looking actually at Ethereum Alliance's pitch deck and saying yes or no. I used to work at Goldman Sachs, so, you know, the strategy, and then R3 Consortium. The same thing happened, right? Where essentially these people came in and said, hey, look, we need these corporate blockchains, these distributed ledgers, closed chains, you know, everybody come together because we provide the best experience. And so I think we might see, you know, parallel in the quote unquote metaverse with these kind of big corporations who have like lots of funding and connections will say, hey, this is our quote unquote metaverse technology. It's the best, you should come over. But if we look at what happened with distributed ledger technology, it was kind of left behind, right? A lot of people left R3 Consortium. Ethereum Enterprise Alliance is just hanging in there. I mean, I don't mean to kind of, you know, bring down the tech itself that they're working, but I think we all know that open source technologies or technologies that are more inclusive, open, and optionality is like definitely is the way to go. And from our perspective, for example, when we look at OpenDive technologies, has been things like interoperability of assets. So people talk about NFTs, right, being interoperable. Well, you know, the taxonomy for NFTs in the metadata is not there. Like, how do you make, for example, NFTs interoperable across different chains? We haven't thought about that, right? And so currently, for example, with our work that we're doing with Metaplex, which is Solana's NFT standard and protocol, we're looking at these concepts and seeing, for example, not only how these NFTs could be interoperable across chains, but also across games and perhaps through a type of taxonomy. But also thinking about the user experience when we're building OpenEra, or also building our wallet, which I showed you a quick demo where you can interact with NFTs and augmented reality and place them and do things like geolocation drop.
I haven't clicked on it yet. I saw it come through, but we were doing this, so I will. This kind of leads me to my next question. Irvin, you're starting to talk about these experiences, direct player or user experiences, and Robert, you got into this idea of these are the virtual experience of the metaverse. Can you touch a little bit? We'll start, Diego, with you. As you're building out your metaverse, augmented reality, metaverse version, whatever it is, what are some of those core experiences that you are really trying to uncover for players? What are those meaningful moments, as they say, that users are having that are a genuine metaverse experience?
Yeah, so basically, what we are trying to build is this bridge between the physical and the virtual. So basically, there are the lowest resistant path to get people in a metaverse basically is through gaming, and that's why I mean the incumbents right now, at least in the metaverse, at least in the crypto world, are basically mostly gaming platforms. So we are, for example, thinking about Sandbox. So in our case, since we're working with augmented reality, and again, the big success in the, let's say, traditional world of augmented reality, for example, is Pokemon Go. The first use case that actually picked up in our platform is a game like Pokemon Go. So people going around and collecting assets. But the big difference, of course, is that those assets that can be owned by people. No? So again, this is the Web3 enabling actually an opt-in ownership of assets, because I mean, users at the end of the day can also just play the game. But I mean, they also can own the assets they want. So this is, I mean, the first use case that we enabled, and is quite successful. And is also very interesting in terms of interoperability, because once we saw that this was working, we started actually onboarding other NFT projects that basically can distribute their NFTs through these means, or can actually gamify those. So this, I think, is one of the first things that is good to actually onboard people and create communities. And another thing, I think that right now everybody talks about play to earn, because of course this is a great success. Also, again, talking about this metaverse term that is a buzzword. So now is applied to everything. For example, Axie Infinity is not, I mean, if we go to the VR version of a metaverse, it's not really a metaverse, but I mean, it's maybe in a broader sense, maybe it's correct to call it a metaverse. So anyway, play to earn from Axie Infinity created this big wave of awareness. But I do believe that actually playing is something important, but also there will be other things inside of this metaverse, other things that maybe can create value to users. So again, I don't want always to talk about my platform, of course I'm biased, so is what I do. What basically now we are building also is a mapping. So basically a job inside the metaverse. So since we need to build this bridge between the physical and the virtual, we actually need to map physical location. And since this is something that has value, this mapping thing can generate an NFT. So again, an activity that maybe is not on the game, that actually generates an asset that actually is enabled, its existence is enabled by the NFT standard. So, I mean, for me, really the important thing is to create experience that I can engage people and let them on board in the platform, and actually create something that generates a digital asset that people can own. I think that these two things are very, very important and are core of this technology.
Robert, how about you? You guys have the ChainGuardians game, and then there's the metaverse that's adjacent and connected. You just said there's a split between those things, a distinction. What are those player experiences, or are they user experiences, and how do they combine?
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, I guess there is an element of personal opinion as to what would constitute a metaverse versus what would not. For me, it's like, again, just alluding to, it depends on whether you're talking about the conceptual or the ideological layer of metaverse or the product layer of metaverse, right? I think there's often some confusion between the two. So for me, like, for example, Axie Infinity, like Diogo alluded to there, you could say it is a metaverse experience on an ideological layer. On a product layer, you know, it doesn't really have those characteristics which would define it as a product of a metaverse. And I think that's where I think the distinction needs to be made, in my opinion. But that said, I think that there is an intrinsic, you know, inseparable symbiotic relationship between blockchain gaming, you know, NFTs and the metaverse, because in many ways, these different types of, you know, the blockchain games and NFTs and the kind of the power that they bring in terms of provable ownership and interoperability are what are going to enable some of these really powerful experiences which are going to occur inside the metaverse. So you can almost like forgive, for example, let's say the confusion of that term in some cases, because for me, the two are, you know, basically symbiotic. There's not really going to be any, I would argue, any successful metaverse or any metaverse at all which is going to exist that doesn't have you know, significant social layers, significant gamification layers, you know, different ways for rewarding users, different ways for encouraging, engaging users to you know, to effectively spend time within that platform. So
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with your definition. I think it's fine. I think this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of Chainlink Labs, but I think the most useful way of defining terms, or the greatest use of defining terms, is to then use them. And I honestly think the discussion about what the metaverse is and isn't, that is the use case for the metaverse, is like we have the conversations to determine, like, well, what's in and what's out? What are you building? What am I building? What are these experiences? I'm of the belief that this interaction that we're having now is a metaverse interaction. Like, it feels genuine to me. It is certainly virtual. Am I being represented by an avatar? No, but it still feels right to me. So anyways, there's a lot of variance in literature about this. Irvin, you were mentioning earlier all the research that's on virtual experiences, and how close they mirror reality and all that. We've seen a lot of that. But in terms of user and player experiences, Irvin, I want to give you a chance as well. What are you guys building? What are some of those core experiences?
Yeah, I think, so 3 points to that note. And just wanted to touch upon what Diego mentioned, right? I think the UX is still broken. It's like horrible. Like for gaming, I can't imagine. Well, I actually have tried it. My 7-year-old nephew logging into a game, having to connect to a wallet, a MetaMask, or create a new wallet to get the seed phrases, and then have to play and stuff like that, right? It's necessary, right? And so UX research is required. And like on the side note, there's like also there are things to consider, like socioeconomic topics like licensing, for example. Right now I'm wearing a Bored Ape hoodie. So Bored Ape has this kind of like open license model, right? But what happens when essentially these games have characters or assets cross over? These are questions that we haven't discussed, and people have their own perspective, but internally, for example, we're doing in terms of experiences and at OpenDive, and we look into our MMORPG Open Era in our wallet, is that technical side, we're thinking about, again, the standards, how to represent these assets, right? And so because you look at how different ecosystems diverge, and it's very interesting, like, within the Solana ecosystem, we kind of developed this entire notion of being able to embed creators, like a certain number of creators, royalties on chain, but also now looking to composability of NFTs. So kind of being able to hierarchically decompose them and put them together for metaverse games. But then you look at, for example, the Polkadot or Kusama ecosystem, you have the remark standard, which Bruno pioneered, right? And they're already kind of thinking about this model and so how they converge. But then you look at Secret Network, and Secret Network has this notion of secret NFTs, right? NFTs that you can reveal. And so each of these ecosystems could provide their own user experience within gaming. Like Secret Network, I talked to Tor and I told him, okay, imagine the unboxing experience of an actual NFT, a secret NFT. Makes sense, right? But yeah, so like, for example, one of the things that we're working on really in particular for Kiyomi Wallet, which is our quote unquote metaverse wallet, you can call it whatever you want. We don't call it a wallet internally. We're looking at things, how to make NFTs more engaging, right? Because I think for the most time, the past, I would say year, because that's when the hype came out, people have been focused on the creation of the NFT or the actual digital asset, but not on the consumption of the NFT or the consumption of the media, right? And we kind of came to realize this because we did a lot of work within our Open Era and RPG with AI, so to create like 3D models and characters. Mm-hmm. And whenever we show people on Blender and we show the animation, they're amazed. Like obviously, oh wow, when is this coming out? How did you do this? We minted it. We put it on like one of the Chrome extension wallets, like MetaMask. Actually, we did Polygon and also did Solana, and we showed it over Zoom, and people are like, okay, that's pretty cool. That's that, right? The experience is very different, right? So it means there's a gap in terms of how we consume that media. And so within our wallet itself that we're working is the ability to kind of interact with NFTs and gamify the experience, right? And as part of Open Era, in terms of like, I would say the user experience, also how the game works, we've been thinking again on the quote unquote, the GameFi model, like, and Diego also mentioned this stuff, right? That, we fundamentally think that the current play to earn model is broken, right? And perhaps we shouldn't really be thinking about play to earn, but rather play and earn optionality, where essentially you can play the game because it's fun, right? But you're not necessarily going to always have to kind of earn something. And those mechanics are there, but just like the entire concept around it is focused on play to earn and stuff like that, right? Because ideally we want people to play this quote unquote games or metaverse experiences at all ages, not just be, crypto degens or people from emerging economies overall. So that's what we're doing differently, within Open Era. We're rethinking the play to earn model, making it play to earn. They're also looking at things like interoperability and also off-game experiences through immersive reality and audio spatial interactions.
There's certainly an interesting dynamic play and earn or play to earn when it comes to playing and earning. Like play and work are very different things. And can they combine? Maybe. Can they combine long-term sustainably? That is still a question, right? It's TBD, according to the research and kind of what we're seeing. So there's some really interesting kind of questions and angles there that have been going on for a long time, right? If you're doing play that then feels like work, is it play at all? The World of Warcraft days, farming your dailies, you know, to go and raid and those things.
And there's one quick note on that, because you know, the play and earn model works, which is, or you know, essentially it's not a new model, but you can think about RuneScape and WoW, right? In RuneScape, people were spent a lot of time making GP, right? But they didn't have to go to the gray markets or dark markets to sell it for Bitcoin or actual, you know, fiat currency. Similar in WoW, right? People like had a lot of gold, but some of them didn't want to go to the gray markets to kind of go ahead and exchange this for fiat or quote unquote Bitcoin, right? There was the option to do that. If you wanted to, you could, right? But otherwise, you just enjoy the game and spend time with your friends.
All of you have mentioned standards. Robert and Diego were talking a bunch about NFT standards and like building out standards before this recording started. Irvin just talked about building out some of these standards. Robert, can you start and just talk a little bit about the standards work that your team is working on and why? Like, what are standards and what do they contribute to this discussion ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's a natural progression to some of the points that Irvin and Diogo was talking about there as well, in the sense of some of the challenges around interoperability and around UX, for example, as well. You know, with UX, Irvin made a point about how the fact that, you know, the UX is still not great for blockchain games and maybe even metaverse-like experiences or products, whatever you want to say. And I think that at the heart of that, obviously, for ChainGuardians, we've been building since 2018. I was involved with Decentraland in 2017 before that. And some of the key challenges include, you know, principally, often where you are providing a stronger UX, it often means that you are having to hold or ascertain more centralized control. So you're constantly trying to balance user experience with, you know, centralization effectively, or centralized decisions versus decentralization. And, you know, for those users that want, you know, and often you've got a little bit of a kind of conflict in the community there, because you will have the degens in inverted commas, or those that have been with blockchain for a long time that want everything decentralized to a large extent because they understand the power of decentralization. However, for the new users that are probably beginning to kind of, let's say, engage with the metaverse, engage with blockchain gaming, they want things as easily, as quickly as possible, because that's what they used to. You know, in the game space that Irvin talked about, research, one of the key things that we've come across is that in the traditional gaming companies, they have this this concept of TTF, right? Time to fun. How many clicks does it take to user to get from, you know, nothing to playing the game? Time to fun. How long is it going to take? And they have like really hard and fast rules, whereas, like, you know, if you can't do it in less than 6 seconds, then you're going to lose users. Or if you can't do it in less than 3 clicks, you're going to lose users. And by its very nature, decentralization, web wallets and such, they require an element of education, and they require an aspect of essentially additional touches before you get to that fun. So it's a challenge that you have. And this, again, you know, naturally leads into the question about standards in the sense that, you know, standards in a similar capacity, the challenges exist in this kind of in the centralization versus decentralization realm, because one chain and one infrastructure layer may be quite a centralized solution, whereas another would be much more decentralized. And as a product developer, as a game developer, you have to make or try to find a middle ground which enables those assets to effectively be interoperable and offer the open metaverse experience, or these, you know, desirable experiences that we all know that decentralization can provide, whilst trying to navigate some of the business decisions around centralization and decentralization when you're trying to think about defining standards. Now, this is something that we've been engaging with since, like I said, 2018. We created an NFT mining platform within ChainGuardians, which is effectively DeFi for NFTs. That was before DeFi was even a thing, really. We were quite early in that thinking, and it was because we looked at existing solutions around NFTs in games, and we found that there was a deflationary value, i.e., NFTs were multiplying, the value were plummeting. It was like, well, okay, how do you underpin the value of that NFT? So we created a system whereby the idea was that any game across any chain, i.e., any NFT on any chain, could come to the NFT mining platform. They could stake that NFT and they could earn passive rewards, either in our token or our partner gaming ecosystems tokens. So we kind of engaged with that fairly early on. And we have a fairly robust backend now, which will handle in multi-chain and such. But what we found was, and this is about also about an education of, say, projects as well, is that the projects themselves wanted to maintain quite tight control over that. For example, they didn't want users holding other NFTs to earn their token. Why should we reward the users that are earning, to earn our token when they don't hold our NFTs? So you have a real conflict when defining these standards, certainly on the infrastructure level, between the actual chains themselves and also in many cases the projects as well. And I'm not so sure exactly if that answers the question, but I'm just kind of highlighting some of the challenges that maybe you have to.
So it reminds me of a few years ago, the ICO boom. There was no established tokenomics. Try something and see if it works. Oh, that didn't work. Try to see if it works. Oh, that kind of worked. And we're in a phase now, new projects launch, and well, is there best practices? It depends on the supply and the whole system. So we're getting closer, but it just takes time. So that's what it feels like to me, which also, if it rings true in one element, that means it's going to ring true. That's probably a technology issue. Like it's a new technology. When you get a new technology and you're figuring out what are the standards, how do people interact with it? That's an interesting question, and it may take time to iterate. Diego, I'm going to get to you in just a sec, but Robert brought up this really interesting idea of time to fun. And so we're going to take a break of like intense blockchain metaverse philosophy. And I'm going to challenge each of you. I'm going to steal the first one, but I'm going to challenge you. Think of an example of a game for those game and experience and product designers. What's a great example of a game that has time to fun? I'll let you, think for a second. I'll go first, which means I'll steal the best one, which is Wordle. Wordle is the best one, if not the best, one of the best time to fun games that I've ever experienced. And I've been playing games for decades. You open the web page and it's instant. Like it makes sense. You type in letters, you get it there. If you have a question, you ask a friend, and there's a friend because everybody's sharing this stuff and you're off to the races. It is so unbelievably well designed. And I think it was accidentally designed, a bit as well. But the time to fun there, right? It makes sense. So quickly. I think it's a really impressive example. Anybody else have an example of a good time to fun product, game type product?
It's a hard one, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I think for me, I mean, you can kind of point to a lot of the bigger games. I mean, I say a lot of the bigger games, some of the really successful games, like even if, for example, we talked about World of Warcraft there. I mean, yeah, you have a bit of a character selection maybe, but honestly, like once that character selection's done, it's like you hit play and then you hit enter and you're in the world. Like, that for example is like, less than it's 2 clicks and you can be in there depending on your computer speed within 3 to 5 seconds, so that for me would be an obvious example. I mean, I
want to make my character every time like that pops up, and I haven't played for years now, but I pop in and test it out and like, all right, I'm gonna see what the new creatures are and check it out. I love that part of the game, so I'm having fun. Yeah, it is. It's a different type of fun. Yeah. Diego, ideas?
Yeah, actually, I'm a little bit biased because in my office I have an old, arcade game. So, but arcade games actually, if you think about that, you have things like Pac-Man. You're immediately in the game. So of course, because that was easier games, but you was immediately in the play. So I think that the more complex is the game, the more this time to fun get longer. But I mean, really, the origin, let's say the old original games are the ones where you're immediately in the action. And yes, Pac-Man, I would say it's a little bit boomer stuff, but
no, I think you're right on. And you think about when I grew up, there was those in every Pizza Hut, there was a flat Pac-Man table. And so instead of the stand-up arcade, there was the flat one. It's such a really interesting user experience. It only happens in this one place, and it is really unique. You could just get there and you could get going right away. Interesting. Irvin, did you have an example?
Yeah, like Robert, honestly, I've always been into MMORPGs or RPGs, and in particular, I mean, I played WoW for a bit, but I was really deep into RuneScape quite a while, and I think the notion here is that the factors of character creation, character progression, and open world exploration really capture people's minds, right? I think you look at World of Warcraft, for example, right? In the case of RuneScape, there wasn't really an explicit lore, but the lore, for example, plays a huge role, believe it or not, when you think about it, right? And you mentioned, for example, seeing what wearables or characters you have. I mean, that happens in all games where you want to rock, the latest, like cape or something like that. And so those kind of games has always been in my heart. RuneScape being the one of it all. I think a lot of people in crypto got started in crypto, through RuneScape.
I think there's a really interesting parallel or issue. Time to fun is an important metric for adoption and for playing, but oftentimes a more complex game, it takes just longer to get to that fun, but they end up being richer experiences on the back end, right? If you play for hours, you get your 100 hours, you're an expert. Chess, right? It's this insanely complex game. You got to spend some time to get there to understand how the pieces combine. And there's many games like that that have that complexity. And as this is a complex ecosystem, Web3, right? Getting your wallet attached, getting assets, understanding gas fees and how those work. But they lead to this understanding of ownership that is this different dimension of experiences than we've previously seen. So maybe there's something in there. I don't have an answer for that one, but it occurred to me in this conversation. Diego,
what about the pay to fun ratio? So how much you pay someone versus how much fun they're having, right?
All right, now we got a new standard. We're going to set up a grant,
Yeah.
Irvin.
We've been looking into that. It's actually a research paper in human computer interaction that we're looking into.
Right,
yeah,
cool.
no, I've heard of this as well. Like it is definitely a thing. My game product manager were talking about this too, and I think and Irvin, maybe it sounds as though you've maybe done a little bit more research than me, but obviously, what the big thing that's kind of really obvious without even needing to do research is that the amount that a crypto user or a blockchain gamer or a degen will pay for their fun in the space is greatly outweighs what the average traditional gamer will pay, right? And I'm sure, like they were saying, my game devs were saying there's some sort of standard that for something like every 30 minutes you play, you should expect to have paid like £5 or something. My metrics might be way off there, but there is something that exists. Irvin, can you enlighten me? Because I've forgotten that.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the research on behavioral economics. And just a quick shout out, because none of people know, I think a lot of people focus on game theory, but actually what we should be, as people in crypto, looking into is behavioral game theory. And within behavioral economics, there's this notion of bounded rationality. So meaning that you have limited rationality where you can do, so hence it can lead to different outcomes on what you have. And also things like prospect theory. I think in particular prospect theory is what you're talking about, essentially where you're evaluating outcomes based on a reference, right? And so in the case of, for example, playing a game and you already know how much you're going to earn, you have a reference of like how fun is it going to be and when to bail out on the game. And this is kind of shapes people's mindset, because if I tell you, all right, Andy, Robert, Diego, you guys are going to make $1,000 a day to play this game, and the game is completely crap, horrible. Are you going to keep on playing or not? You already know ahead of time, right? But perhaps you grind it through the game enough to have fun, right? At a certain point. But if you didn't have this beforehand, or if you did, it kind of shapes your mindset.
Here's my life pro tip: is apply that to a book you're reading. You're not going to get money out of it, but as you're reading a book, you can say like, is it going to be worth it to finish this book? And you know what? Some of you just need to learn, just put down the book. So you don't have to finish every book you read. Let me get back to Diego. One of the things I want you to have a chance to talk about standards, but one of the things you mentioned earlier was gameplay, and you guys are designing these gameplay experiences. for NFTs and these different things. So talk a little bit about that. As we think about gameplay experiences, we just got into this time to fun idea. What are those sorts of experiences that you're designing or that you're seeing players play, you know, with or without your design, things kind of coming to light? What are those gameplay elements?
Yeah, so basically, I will come also a little bit back to the point of the friction, no? Because of course there is. So for us, I mean, crypto agents and so on, everything is easy. But actually, I mean, the barrier to entry to people that actually are not familiar with blockchain is huge. If you ask them to actually have a wallet, or actually, I mean, know what are the city phrases, have MetaMask and so on. So actually, in our case, when we built our product, actually, I mean, our final product, so the app basically that people is using, actually, in our case, people don't really need to know anything about blockchain. So the way really we like to think about these kind of games is that the blockchain side, the Web3 side, the ownership side, need to be an opt-in part.
Yeah.
Because also, I mean, if you really force this, I mean, earning thing about the game, maybe it's not a game anymore. Like for example, when we think of Axie Infinity and the huge success that they had, I maybe will be wrong, but I don't think that actually the huge number of users that they have are there for having fun. I mean, most of them are there for earning. So really, when you design a game, I mean, in our case at least, when we design, for example, the first version of our play to earn game. So basically, this is just a treasure hunt. Really, the idea is: are we designing this for people to have fun, or are we designing this for people to try to earn something? So you have really two different kind of philosophies when you build this kind of stuff, and also it makes me think about NFTs, like for example POAP. Now we're working, we're starting collaborating also with them, and in that case, for example, the NFTs, the people that collect these NFTs, they are not really doing. I mean, when you say NFT, everybody say, okay, yeah, this is something that should be valuable. Not necessarily. I mean, that could be also only a collectible and so on. So really, I think that the earn side is a kind of big disruptor in game design. And so, of course, I think that for the moment, I mean, the crypto games, many of the crypto games thinks really a lot about the crypto economics of things. And I mean, it's fine. But of course, this really changes totally the direction of where the game is going. So I hope I answer your question. I'm not sure about that, but
it's such a fascinating can of worms. It really is, because the idea of people playing for earning experiences versus play experiences, it's sure is a lot more entertaining to have income than it is to not have income. So that could be argued as more fun. Who are we to decide what's fun and what's not fun in some cases? On the other hand, it's not a traditional play experience.
Yeah,
play has some used to it.
Yeah, like for example, just coming back to this, I mean, treasure hunt game. So we had the first collaboration with an NFT project was with Dogepound. So back then, the guy who collected more 3D assets in the physical world actually got an actual NFT. Back then, this Dogepound, the first prize was a Dogepound that the value was 3 ETH, so it was around 15K. So there was people that actually spend the whole waking hours of their day going around with a bicycle to collect assets. So is that fun or is not fun? I mean, that is not fun anymore. I mean, maybe for 10 minutes, but I mean, that becomes a job. So really, the fact of attaching value to a game really disrupts what's the idea of doing something for fun or doing something for, I mean, gaining a lot of money. So that is the point.
I think I'd love to offer a comment here, if that's okay, Andy. Is that this is a really interesting conundrum, and it's something that we engage with daily at ChainGuardians. Is because, you know, the game is effectively being designed to be play to earn, and of course, you know, you've got that kind of. You've always got in the back of your mind, like the balancing act of, is this fun or does this feel like work? Because I can earn here does it mean that I can no longer have fun? And trying to find the, you know, the balance between the two. And I think for ourselves at ChainGuardians, what we try to, or the analysis that we've done is that our community is made up of a number of different types of individuals. And it's not just one, you know, it's not 100% coming to play and earn. It's not 100% coming to just have fun. It's not 100% coming just to collect. It's actually an amalgam of all of these different types of people, right? Like Diego suggested here, for example, they had a number of community members who, for example, are interested in potentially just collecting the POIPs that could collaborating with Pope, but then they had some community members that were out cycling, right, trying to collect these, and obviously they were very much motivated by the financial reward at the end of that. And I think that fundamentally here, what we're talking about is like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, right? The extrinsic being the financial reward, the intrinsic being, you know, let's say the more let's say the soft reasons that I would want to, like belonging, for example. But Bored Ape, for example, is more of an intrinsic value, right? It's a sense of belonging to a community, and I'm probably doing a disservice there. I know it's much wider than that, but in principle, that's one of the fundamental values of Bored Ape. Whereas for like Axie, for example, one of the fundamental values is a little bit more extrinsic, which is play to earn. However, I think what you'll find is as you delve deeper into those communities, there's a host of different types of players that are there for different reasons. Like we have very big collectors who probably have no intentions ever of even playing the game, to be completely honest. They like to collect the NFTs. But we also have a good base of the users there that are very much looking forward to the earn capacity. And I think that if you adequately layer the different elements of fun and the different elements of earning, the different types of members that you've got in the community, if you can balance that well enough, that actually you can strike a balance between this is still fun, but there's the opportunity to earn as well. That's how we see it anyway.
We're kind of running up on time. So Irvin, I want to give you a chance to kind of respond to this if you had ideas, because it's kind of just like a good summary of our thinking around users and experiences and industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's two things to say. Like, you know, we could sit here and discuss these questions for months or years. You know, but we need to ship and go to mainnet, right? In our case, we're not a professor coin, right? But we're just thinking a bit more deeply on these questions before going live. That is the honest truth from our case, right? And look, the other point is, look, I think we're at a point in history where we can rewrite the core fabric of society, you know, to rethink and reimagine these social constructs. You know, and fundamentally speaking, played or earned is about transforming labor structures, right? And so that's why emerging economies are benefiting from these concepts. And so I think it's always good to keep that in mind, that we're building products that are fun, but also products that are transforming labor structures or could transform labor structures and bring stability to many nations and individuals.
Yeah, it occurred to me as we talk about the difference between play and work, maybe it's a complete paradigm shift and we need to think in a different adjacent thing. When we talked about remote work and work from home, I'm home now. Am I in my pajama pants? Yes. Am I still working? Yeah, like I'm contributing meaningfully, but it actually took us quite a while and a major global event to make that an acceptable thing for normal folks, except in crypto, right? We were kind of already doing it. But there are these transformative events and moments where we need to adjust our thinking. You know, Kuhnian paradigm shift really does happen, and maybe we're there. But Irvin, to your point of shipping, yeah, we need to ship. But also we do need to have these conversations. I know you agree as well. These conversations help others think about it and help ourselves think about it as well. So to all of you, thank you so much for your time. Diego, Robert, Irvin, I'll make sure and have links to all of your projects down below. So you can go and follow all these guys, follow their projects, follow their Twitters, and follow all the Chainlink communities as well. For that. So before we wrap, this is presented by Chainlink Labs. And we didn't talk too much about Chainlink. Chainlink is infrastructure that helps power many of these experiences, whether it's through randomization, off-chain computation, or secure decentralized price feeds. We don't always need to talk about Chainlink because these issues are bigger than infrastructure. They're social. As Irvin said, we're rewriting the fabric of society. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe to these YouTube videos. We'll see you next time. My name is Andy Boyan from Chainlink Labs. Peace.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.